welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I hope you guys are doing well. Happy Thursday, everybody. I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about this upcoming Jupiter in Gemini transit. I've been looking at this for a little bit, and I put together something for you guys today that I hope you enjoy. We will be previewing this transit and talking about it more as we get closer to the end of May of 2024. But if you guys like my content, you want to see more of it, make sure you click the bell button below, subscribe to the channel, and give me a thumbs up and let me know in the comment section, where is this transiting in your chart? Do you remember the last time we had this transit? What happened for you? Do you have Jupiter in Gemini, or are you just a Gemini placement person who's like super stoked for this transit? Let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Any interaction really helps the channel grow. I really appreciate it. This is going to be so much fun to talk about. So I love how there's been so many positive transits that have been kind of making up the content the last week or so. So we're going to kind of keep that going. Everybody loves talking about Jupiter. Jupiter is the planet that brings all of us joy and a little bit of humor, more confidence, more opportunity for learning, and certainly some abundance. So if you're watching this, this is kind of coming out somewhere around sometime, I'm assuming the beginning of May. So we're taking an extra early look at this. But this transit is important because Jupiter changes signs roughly every year. So we're really looking at a pretty wide range of time that Jupiter is going to be in the sign of Gemini. And it's going to be beginning on May 25th, 2024. So from May 25th of this year through June 9th of 2025, Jupiter will be in this particular sign. Now, who is this going to affect the most? Well, those of you guys who are obviously Gemini, sun, moon, or rising, you guys will be visited by Jupiter this year, bringing you new beginnings, new opportunities. I think a little bit more enthusiasm and optimism about the future, but also those of you guys who are ruled by Jupiter. So my Sagittarius and my Pisces risings, this is important for you guys as well as we start to see Jupiter change signs. It will also be in the same duplicity. So it is positive for you guys because it's also going to be moving through a mutable sign. Granted, you guys are going to have some Jupiter squares, but this is going to feel almost like growing pains, you know, kind of growing into something new, or situations that have evolved to a point where you're ready for some new beginning because, well, mutable signs are all about change. So Jupiter, king of all the gods, king of expansion, law, travel, ethics, philosophy, all of these things are going to be hot topics that are going to be coming up throughout this next year under the lens of Gemini. So Gemini being the third sign of the zodiac, this is mutable air, you know, in the, realm of mercurial things. So we're going to see Jupiter expanding mercurial things. In theory, Jupiter creates like stabilization, cohesion, growth, and support. It is related to belief, knowledge, optimism, and abundance. It's also about protection, politics, law, educators, universities. These are all connected to Jupiter. So I anticipate we're going to hear more talking, right? I guess talking about this because it's going to be in Gemini. We're going to hear this more on, like newsletters and emails and meetings and discussions, community discussions. Gemini can be about your community, your neighborhood. There's definitely going to be more talk about this also on media. So like newspapers and news channels, television, streaming, apps, social media, all of that stuff is all Mercury related and connected to Gemini as well. Now, some traits that you guys want to kind of think about when we think about this particular transit is that Mercury has association with Gemini. So this is about logic, learning, and intellect. But we're actually taking Jupiter, which is traditionally associated with Sagittarius or Pisces, and we're placing kind of like the big mind in this sign of Gemini, which can be more about basic learning and skills and things pertaining to communication, writing, or sharing. This is also connected to like elementary school versus Sagittarius, which would be like the higher mind, you know, kind of college degrees. So we're going to have a lot of people, I think, talking about and discussing things connecting to education. I think that's going to be a big topic. Trying to explain and help other people comprehend what's going on globally. in a much more simplified kind of fashion. This is also, taking place in a sign that deals with, performative energies and anything connecting to kind of like your day-to-day life, the things that you're doing, similar to Virgo. That's more your habits, but this is like, what news are you watching? When you're walking down the street, who are you talking to? What is it that you're interested in kind of learning about? What kind of books do you read? What kind of media do you watch? And obviously this is in an air sign. So Gemini being in this sign is very imaginative. It's also about things that are logical, things that are intellectual. So we're going to be kind of talking more about this stuff. It's also a double-bodied sign. So this is a sign that has some sense of duality. So it means that it can be adaptable, flexible, a multitasker, but also multi-talented. And this can be positive because it means we can kind of, walk and chew gum, but it can indicate that there can be some downfalls to this as well, where Jupiter can get hyperstimulated or reading too much at one time or consuming too much or learning too much. So it can kind of have a difficult time like paying attention, right? So watch for that as well. It's a masculine sign also. So we've got Jupiter, which is generally, a masculine kind of energy that associated with Sagittarius fire coming through an air sign. So it's also going to be assertive. It's going to be bold. It's going to be passionate. It's going to be speaking out. So we're definitely going to notice this uptick in media, communications, things relating to information, writing, speaking, texting, that kind of stuff. So the area of influence with Gemini is going to be things like imagination and inventiveness, charm, I think, and sense of humor, logic and problem solving. That's going to be a big theme with Jupiter going through this sign. Communication and self-expression, and obviously curiosity, right? Those of you guys who have a really strong kind of third house placement or a ton of Gemini in your chart, curiosity is a thing. There's always this sense of trying to understand and comprehend and playing devil's advocate. But sometimes also like curiosity can kind of kill the cat. So we can definitely see too much information, too much of an overload of communication, digging too deep or trying to talk about things that we can't quite really grasp or comprehend can get us into a little bit of trouble. So Jupiter in Gemini is going to bring this blend of like curiosity and intellectual exploration and this quest, right? Jupiter is the quest for knowledge. So it's going to be, I think, wonderful for those of us who are wanting to like read, write, and learn more. Like if you've been wanting to learn a new language, this is a good transit for that. Those of you guys who already have like the gift of gab, it might just make you even stronger when it comes to, your conversations and what you're learning. Those of you guys who have this natally, that you have a natural talent for communication and great networking, and you know how to kind of connect with the collective groups of other people. However, this placement doesn't come without challenges. Jupiter is technically in detriment in the sign of Gemini because it's in the opposite sign of Sagittarius, which it calls home. So when we're placing Jupiter, which is like the philosopher, the teacher, the publisher, the way shower in the house of Gemini, it can kind of get tripped up a little bit. And we can definitely see that this can kind of lead to a sense of FOMO, where people are having a fear of like missing out in learning or talking about something. So they'll kind of like interject their thoughts into conversations. We can also see that it can have a very short attention span. So I'm going to tell you guys in the next year, ADD issues are real. We're going to find that whether that's because we're kind of sucked into what we're reading, what we're scrolling through, what apps we're involved in, that can get us into some trouble, as well as some other aspects that we're going to see to planets in Pisces. And there can also be a tendency to kind of jump from subject to subject or project to project or relationship to relationship without seeing things through, all the way to the ending and actually completing stuff. So that can be kind of difficult as well. For me, some of the themes that I think about with Jupiter going into Gemini is definitely outside of like the heightened kind of focus on communication and learning. I think it's going to be about people who are going to be feeling more so likely to want to broaden their horizons and expand their minds through open conversation, exploring new ideas and engaging in diverse experiences. However, the challenge in this kind of lies in, really being in a situation where we're having to comprehend things or culture or belief systems or learning how to translate things that like we don't quite understand. So the desire for knowledge and experience needs to also be equally met with the desire for focus and depth, not just kind of getting like a surface kind of introductory crash course into something and then thinking we know everything. Sometimes, for those of you guys who have like Jupiter in the third house or Jupiter in Gemini natally, you might notice that you spread yourself too thin. And I think part of that is the initiating and starting things and not finishing it, but you'll have a wide variety of different interests. So a lot of this can be about narrowing things down this year. And instead of being kind of like a jack of all trades, like really focusing on being able to do one thing and being able to do it very well. Now, kind of playing off of like this, the lesson of the detriment, I think this is also like, it really, what it means here is that expansive and optimistic energy of Jupiter is somewhat restricted in the sign of Gemini. Because it's ruled by Mercury, and that's more on gathering and dismantling information rather than the broad kind of philosophical perspective that Jupiter generally represents. So as a result, collectively, or even on an individual level, we may feel like we need to work on developing our ability to see the bigger picture and commit to a single path or idea, rather than our tendency to kind of like roam, because that's what Jupiter wants to do. So what am I seeing during this particular Jupiter in Gemini transit? Well, obviously, number one is intellectual expansion. So I think a lot more people are going to be asking questions. They're going to be saying, why? How? Explain it to me. What does it mean? And people are going to be more doing a deep dive into understanding language, into understanding beliefs, culture. It could even be about philosophy. People are going to be wanting to learn more about these topics. And I do think that it can lead to an increased interest in education, communication, and technology. So likely we're going to see advancements in these fields and innovations that enhance the ability to share and access information. You guys will see, I'll take you through the transits and kind of the big kind of hot moments that we're going to see with Jupiter throughout this next year. But just even the ingress in itself, we will see Jupiter kind of meeting in the final moments of Taurus, where it connects with Venus and it sextiles Neptune, and there's something that is being built or physically developing. And then we'll see Venus and Jupiter and the Sun all move into Gemini. So there is this sense of communicating and talking about what we love and sharing our beliefs about education and possibly looking into like new books and new things we can be learning about. And that's all going to be trining Pluto. So there's going to be a lot of depth. There's going to be a passion that's kind of connected to this. This is going to be something we're sharing with the collective. Obviously, Venus has connections with relationships, but also socializing and money and investments and resources. So it'll be interesting to see, both Venus and the Sun come through with that ingress and make kind of contact with, the collective vibes of Pluto. Societal changes, I think, is pretty expected, especially with some of these aspects to outer planets. Trines to Pluto can be major collective realizations or wake-ups, through some kind of information that's kind of coming out in the world. Squares to Saturn, we're going to see this year several times, and that can also materialize as feeling like our energy is being thwarted, how much we can learn, how much we have access to, what we can read, what websites we can see, what applications or social media apps we have access to, and where that is kind of being limited or blocked. And then we'll also see some sextiles to the North Node in Aries, and this is where people are actually taking it upon themselves to be more independent, especially when it comes to communication, sharing, learning. So we will see societal changes. As Gemini is a social sign, Jupiter's transit in this sign might lead to societal changes and different dynamics. This can manifest as new forms of social media, changes in how we communicate with each other, shifts in societal norms and values. And we may notice that there may be a stronger focus on collaboration and networking, community building. This will be magnifying themes revolving around communications and debate and learning and seeing two sides of an opinion and like learning how to agree to disagree, but still having like this public forum. Equally, this can be about getting to know our local communities better, getting to know our neighbors better, focusing more on that kind of like local connection and having a better understanding that if we want to see change in the world, right, Pluto and Aquarius, then it really starts at home, and a lot of like grassroots initiative to bring communities together and to kind of have these town hall meetings and kind of connect locally and be able to spread the word. I think about what is happening globally is not just happening necessarily in another country or in another state. It can actually be coming to a neighborhood near you. So all the more important, I think, to focus on these relationships that we're kind of like, we're nurturing, we're growing within our local community. I also think that there's going to be economic shifts. Jupiter is a positive sign. He does want to bring us good things. He does want to bring us more. But this is where really understanding planets in specific decans or planets in specific signs and how they perform and how they're aspected is very important. So for me, when I think of Jupiter going into Gemini, I think of changes to the financial sector, especially related to technological advancements and shifts in global economic structures. As Gemini is associated with commerce and trade, right? It's about systems and communications, and it's about, what apps we're using to swipe credit cards and things pertaining to education, to travel, to mail, to shipping. All of that stuff has kind of connections to Gemini. I think about like websites and also trade and things that we can do with our hands, or any kind of like exchange is definitely Gemini as well. So it has associations with commerce and trade, but also it can signal significant changes to the global economy. Because Jupiter is a global energy, it has connections to Sag, which means like the whole world. And then it has connections to Pisces, which is the collective. So it can mean what's actually changing with global beliefs, what's changing with global communications, what's changing in terms of global relations. What kind of an impact is that actually having on how we can connect with other people? So I'm anticipating some changes to international trade agreements. That's the feeling that I'm getting. New improvements maybe to post or anything pertaining to shipping or importing or exporting. New apps and websites and media companies and things coming online as well. I'm looking for things in pairs, so definitely double trouble kind of comes up with Gemini. We might see some really significant duos where, we're seeing some amazing debates between two opposing sides. We're going to see some amazing teams or partnerships that are being developed because there's strength in numbers when you're dealing with Gemini. There's two pieces of the puzzle. Now, throughout recent history, if I go back like the last, 50, 60 years or so, there has been this reoccurring pattern with this Jupiter transit every single time that there has been a very noticeable shift in terms of the economy, in particular, the unemployment rate. So I'm only going to touch on the last few cycles, really like the last 30 years or so. But you can go back and you can look at what has happened during these time periods. The last time that we had Jupiter in Gemini was 2012 to 2014. The time before that was 2000 to 2001. And then the time before that was 1989 to 1990. There is a period where we have a Jupiter retrograde briefly for a few months, but for the most part, Jupiter is going to stay in the sign of Gemini for about a year. And I went and looked at the unemployment rates. So I just want to preface this by saying this now, just to give you guys some perspective. As of now, in April of 2024, when I'm recording this video, apparently the current rate for unemployment is 3.8%. So how accurate those numbers are, who knows? The job reports are totally screwed, and that's not an opinion, it's a fact. We're going and now seeing economists and other people kind of picking apart the job reports, realizing actually, wait a second, when we're calculating in inflation, and we're also looking at, well, was it full-time jobs, was it part-time jobs, or were these jobs actually going to people who have immigrated here? Is it really going to Americans? Are we seeing more people who are picking up second, third jobs? Is this kind of gig work versus full-time employment? Those numbers are not looking so hot. So throughout history, what I've noticed over the last, like I said, 50, 60 years is that these Jupiter in Gemini transits have corresponded with periods where we have seen higher unemployment numbers. We have seen more layoffs. We have seen more challenges. And I think this kind of speaks to, basically Jupiter being in the detriment, that we can make things sound really good, right? Jupiter is positive. We can make things sound positive. We can push out that narrative where we say it's not that bad and inflation isn't as bad as you think it is, and maybe it's just this. And we've all started kind of seeing this uptick already of really positive, optimistic spins on what's going on with the economy, or what's going on with travel, or what's going on with media. But I would be really cautious about where you're getting your information and your news sources from with this transit in the next year. And I'll show you why. But like I said, as I record this, 3.8% unemployment rate in April of 2024. I went back and I looked at 2012 to 2014, and the unemployment rate ranged within that year of the Jupiter transit 8.1 to 7.4%. Okay, so it kind of started higher in 2012, and then it dropped slightly by not even a whole point to 7.4%. So to put it in perspective, that's like what? That's 4% more than it is right now. And that was 12 years ago, okay? So just food for thought. Okay, so we go back another 12 years and we look at what happened in 2000 to 2001. That year in 2000, unemployment was roughly around 4.0%. Leading into 2001, we saw 4.7% unemployment rate. So to put it in perspective, this is almost 24 years ago. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying that. I sound old. Almost 24 years ago. And the unemployment rate was higher then than it is now. Okay. And I'm speaking purely in in numbers. I don't want to talk about who the president was. I don't even need to talk about anything else. I'm just giving you guys the facts and figures that it was not as positive or optimistic as maybe they wanted it to sound. And then we go back a little bit further to 1989 and 1990. And in 1989, the unemployment rate on average in America was 5.3%, leading into 1990, which did come back down to about 3.6%. This was pushing 36 years ago, okay, when it's all said and done, around the same percentages that we're kind of sitting at now. Totally different global economy, post-COVID, huge inflation, major issues with global and government budgeting, and so I'm anticipating we're gonna see some stuff. So a lot of that stems primarily from just how Jupiter has performed in previous years. It also is going to be some of the aspects that Jupiter is going to be making. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, there is some positive stuff with the trines to Jupiter. But really for me, my loss of optimism is going to stem more from when we start seeing planets coming into Gemini, squaring Saturn and Neptune. Pretty much June on, things are not looking as optimistic. It's also not feeling as easy to move around, to communicate, to travel. Remember that Jupiter wants to bring truth. Even if it's in a sign that it doesn't perform well in, it is going to be bringing up all of these topics and themes revolving around our communications, what we say on the phone, what we say on the internet, and everything with like documents and travel. And all of this stuff is going to get checked by Saturn, okay? So they say that when a Jupiter transit corresponds with a square to Saturn, it's diminishing the positive effects of Jupiter. So we've already got Jupiter that's kind of not going to behave as well in this sign. It can have a tendency to kind of get off track, but then it's going to get lassoed in by Saturn. I'm going to do a whole separate video on this as we get closer to those transits, because we're not going to see that happen until like August or the end of this year. But I've made the reference that for me, this transit reminds me of the phrase, some of the best blessings are unanswered prayers. And very much Pisces is about what we pray for, what we believe in, what we're holding on to, what we're hoping for. And we want Jupiter, which is traditionally associated with Pisces, to come out and say, oh yeah, here's the truth. And, I'm going to spread it everywhere. I'm going to get it out there. And I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to post about it. Or the things that we've been praying for or manifesting and asking for. And then we may feel like with the square to Saturn that we don't get them. And it may actually be a positive thing. I think hands down, this is going to be really telling, and it's going to be very much connected to censorship. And if you guys think you've seen censorship already, get ready, because this is going to be basically the organized 1-year process where certain government entities or, kind of overreaching corporate companies or other things are going to have an effect or a stronghold on what you write, what you say. This is also going to be about surveillance because Saturn in Pisces is kind of like hidden, and it's like looking at things behind closed doors, and it's not what you can see. So it can also be about things relating to like all of this like FISA stuff and, you know, our surveillance state and whether or not we actually have freedom of communications and if that's being infringed upon. So that's basically the long and short. It's gonna go on for a year. We're definitely going to see more, I think, coming up against media and networks. And I think the smartest thing to do is diversify when you look at Gemini. Have two of everything. I always laugh when I see people who have third house placements or a lot of Gemini placements. There's the sense of being like, I have two phones, I have two this, I have two that. And it's not for a material, it's not like a material thing, because Taurus might be like the prepper, you know. Well, Gemini is like, well, I need to have a cell phone and a home phone. You know, I need that for communication. Or I've got, you know, two different credit cards that I use for two different things. Have backup social media, okay? Or don't have social media at all. I don't really care. Have a backup channel. So if you're somebody who's like a content creator, I've been looking at these transits being like, you know, really, really good time to start doing some of the same thing or create a separate kind of way of being able to connect with my audience. And so whether that's going to be, you know, a Rumble channel, or if that's going to be a newsletter, or if that's going to be another YouTube channel, something that is dual is a good idea. And you're going to hear things like dual citizenship. Okay. That's going to be big in this next year. Dual IDs. There's going to be more conversations about also, what education we have, and if we're going and getting some kind of like re-education, or if we're going and we're reviewing something in Gemini, that's going to give us more skills, and where we're feeling more diversified, perhaps through having like certifications or training or licenses or IDs, that will come up with this as well. Anyway, you can't talk about Jupiter without talking about travel and exploration, because that's a huge theme for Jupiter. When we think of Sagittarius, it wants to go out and be out in the elements and just roam. That's what it wants to do, right? So when you put it in the sign of Gemini, it's less roaming on a global level. It's more roaming on a local level. And this is why I said it can be about getting to know, you know, your local communities, not trying to shop with large companies and trying to get resources from other places, learning how to be more conservative about your spending and also more selective about where you're buying from. And it may be a really good time to be investing in supporting smaller businesses and things that are kind of community based. With that being said, does Jupiter in Gemini, you know, lead to increased travel and exploration, both physically and intellectually? Yes. But Jupiter has connections to airplanes. And so when we put Jupiter in the sign of Gemini, where it's in its detriment, there is definitely going to be more challenges revolving around the airlines, and it's going to be promoting more third house kind of transportation. I think you're going to see some people being like, I don't feel safe in airplanes. It's too expensive. It's unreliable. Or there's going to be some things that are going on where there is limits to how often you can travel, where you can travel, how many flights are available. And it's going to be prompting things like bicycles, walking, scooters, cars, things that are going to be more road trips, right? More kind of local travel versus going to an airport and going somewhere far away. I definitely think that, you know, Jupiter and Gemini is a great time to start walking, to start getting used to riding bikes, to doing these things. And I don't say this because like I'm a climate alarmist. That's not why I'm saying it. But if there is, for whatever reason, challenges getting places, it's going to incentivize people to learn, right, Gemini, more about their local streets. I am the biggest, I guess, like person for really kind of feeling this particular transit and the square. I feel like the last year or so I've kind of realized like it's really hard for me. Part of it's because I grew up in LA. So like the last 2 or 3 years I've been in very different states than where I grew up. But I like live by my GPS. And I've thought about, oh, Jupiter coming into square with Saturn, like what happens for whatever reason if I can't use my GPS, or, you know, I'm one of those grid situations, like how would I know where I'm going? So it prompted me to be like, okay, I need to learn how to use a compass, and like I probably should get a Thomas guide, and like I should probably start kind of like learning more about the freeways and getting around and understanding like roads outside of freeways. Just some food for thought, but I could definitely see that being a theme with Jupiter going into Gemini and the squares to Saturn, where we're becoming less reliant on what screens tell us, and whether that's in getting around and traveling, or if this is becoming less reliant on what the news is telling you should or should not do, what the powers that be are telling you should or should not do. You know, I'm a bit of a contrarian myself, pretty Uranian. So I've gotten to this point where I'm like, now I just pay attention to where when we're told not to do something, I'm like, oh, that's probably the thing that I should be doing, you know? And that's very Jupiter and Gemini. It's like, well, I'm gonna play devil's advocate. Obviously, take that advice with a grain of salt, but I do think this is a lot more about having conversations and discussing why are these things coming up? What is the purpose? Where did that come from? And really going a little bit deeper because Jupiter wants to comprehend and kind of understand some of these topics better. This could also mean going deeper into philosophy, going deeper into language, learning more in regards to spirituality or divination or your belief system, because the mutable signs can be about these things. I also think that there is going to be, maybe in some places increased global travel, but I don't think that's going to last for very long. Because even when we see Jupiter retrograde, it's still going to square Saturn. So I don't think it's going to create this big travel boom. We may see more so in like May, June, and July. But then I think it's going to kind of start to fall off a little bit. I think we're going to see increased interest in virtual exploration through digital platforms. And like this makes my skin crawl, but I think about like the Oculus and the headsets and the whole like, oh, it's too expensive and it's too, complicated going places and all of this stuff. So like here, put your headset on and like go and look at the Colosseum, and some people might look at that and go, that's amazing. But other people like being in the third dimension and they like the idea and the concept of being able to physically go somewhere and explore, not just seeing something and like believing that it's real. And so I would say watch for that, because we are going to see trines to Pluto. So it can be basically be saying that there is a way to transform the way that we look at travel through some kind of shift or significant change in technology. I do think I would pay attention, because I anticipate that there may potentially be new rules or limitations, because Pluto is retrograde, revolving around travel, revolving around IDs and licenses, passports. I feel like we're already hearing a lot where there are some countries that are creating more incentive for people to be able to get digital nomad visas, to be able to potentially have citizenship, to be able to relocate and go to other places. And this I like, because especially with like Jupiter and Venus in the mix, it can be saying like, are you knowledgeable? Do you teach something? Are you into philosophy? Are you into science, math? Are you an artist? How can you contribute to some kind of collective, and like where actually can there be this gift that can allow you to travel more freely or relocate or become a citizen of another place? Apparently this is what's being discussed in, I think it's El Salvador right now. So I wonder if we're going to see more of this. Are we going to see more, international countries realize that, they have the ability to not only improve their kind of like their country and their culture through bringing more, I think, diverse minds, but also so great for the economy. So some countries may really start seeing the opportunity to do that. I was just watching a video. If you guys haven't seen, I think it's Digital Nomad Capitalist. I think that's his name. He did an interview with somebody, and I've been watching his videos for a while, where he talks about diversification with passports and second homes and citizenships and stuff. And he talks a lot about probably some of the stuff that you guys would find really interesting. Where should I go, and what's the best place to be, and like where am I gonna be like the most financially kind of independent. So I could see a lot of people thinking more about these things, looking around going like, well, where could I take myself or my business, and how would I get there, and what about languages? So I think we'll see some people that are going to be kind of delving a little bit deeper into some of these topics. Like I said, some sort of regulation around journalists or media, I think that's almost a guarantee. Very rarely do I say these things will happen, but I think this is one of the things that will happen, because we will see that pretty tight square to Saturn in Pisces. So Saturn in Pisces wants to govern over things, kind of behind the scenes, just pulling the strings, right? It's the puppet master. And then Jupiter wants to be the first one on the scene with with the microphone, being like, hey, what happened? Tell me all about it. And whether this is, throttling of internet speeds, if this is requiring, certain journalists to have certain IDs or certification or membership to be able to speak on things. But there is going to be a sense of wanting to have some kind of control over what's being said, where you get your news from, what you're hearing, what you're reading. And definitely Saturn creates delays, or it distorts, or it slows things down, or in Pisces, it makes things disappear. So it may become more challenging to find some of this information. And I think a lot of that's primarily, I think, also connected to Pluto and Aquarius. There are things that's going on, I think, with algorithms and now new facets almost of like artificial intelligence that's coming in and working on platforms that's picking up keywords. They are aware of things that are being said. They are aware of people who are looking at stuff, and that in itself is generating data, which can be analyzed and then have more of a say in what you're actually going to be seeing or what you're consuming. So it's not so much that things are being wiped from the internet. It's just, I think, going to be more difficult for that information to be found, if that makes sense. Anyway, watch for legal and ethical reforms. I definitely think that's a theme with Jupiter and Gemini, because likely there may be like a focus on, some of these reforms, particularly in areas relating to communication, privacy, and intellectual property. So this could lead to changes in laws and regulations, as well as public discourse on these topics. I'm all about that. If that's what's going on, we should be able to talk about it. But you guys have to understand something, that so many people are kind of getting like, I think, burnt out, being like, well, what am I going to do? I'm just one person. I can't do anything. Part of this is about, I guess, like educating yourself, at least here in the United States, and understanding that the reason why things are getting to the point where they're getting to on the federal level is because of who is being voted in the lower levels of politics. Get involved in your city council meetings. Know who you're voting into office. If you're not voting, then you should be, and you should be aware of who's actually being brought in your local government, which is leading to stuff on a state level that is having some kind of sway on a federal level. If we have enough people who are talking about this and getting involved in this way, it can be enough to really kind of spark a major change. I also think that this is going to be about cities and like local spaces governing in a very different way. Being more in tune with what the people want with some of those trines to Pluto and Aquarius. I do think also that there is going to be more debate about law and legality. In recent, weeks, we've heard that in some states, I think it's in District of Columbia now, not needing to necessarily like go to law school to become a lawyer, which is scary, because when you think about some of the places where we want to have some of the sharpest minds, people who have really done their time and are the most capable, being able to go into law, who eventually could become judges and other people high up on the food chain when it comes to the legal system. Bit of a slippery slope. And so maybe that in itself is like Jupiter and Gemini, where we're starting to kind of like realize, okay, well, is there going to be some kind of digitalization of certificates and certifications? Maybe. Are they trying to, completely get rid of any falsified documents? Possibly. Would this be moving certain documents and things onto blockchain? And whether that's going to be mortgages or deeds or anything kind of connected to birth certificates, IDs, we may hear more about some of that stuff. And I think we're going to talk about it as well. I would also say that it's going to be a lot more where we're going to be talking about early childhood education, because Gemini is about those early years, at least up until high school. That's more Leo. College is going to be more Sagittarius, and how we are playing much more of a role in making sure that kids can read and write. We've had years that children were out of school, or they were doing distant learning, or they were learning on the computer. They lost opportunities that were key moments for socialization and development of those skills. And we are now finding that certain educational institutions are lowering the standards of grades. If you guys haven't seen some of the stuff that's coming out of like some of the Pacific Northwest, terrifying with the way that they're reworking the grading system. I saw a thing the other day that was like, now they're going to be considering an A, anything from 100% to like an 82%. And I don't know about you guys, I'm not that old, I'm getting there, but like where I come from, that's like barely a B. You know what I'm saying? 82%. And then when you look at, oh, well then a B is actually going to be, 82 to like 72%. And it's like, what the hell? We're literally lowering the expectations when it comes to reading and writing. Some children in school don't even know how to tell time on a clock with hands. So we're moving to a digital system. We're not teaching, shorthand. We're not teaching, cursive anymore in schools. Why? These are people who are not going to be able to read the Constitution. They're not going to be able to read stuff that's been put in place that was the founding, at least for our country. We are also no longer really doing stuff by hand any longer. We're doing everything now through computers. Everything now is going to be digital. So for me personally, I keep thinking about real simple solution. If people are really worried about surveillance, if you're worried about what you're searching for on the internet or what you're talking about on a phone, or what blogs you're reading or what you're kind of posting on Twitter, like turn off your phone, go out and go and talk to people in the real world. Start keeping notes, writing things down. Things can be changed and transformed in a digital format. Things like Wikipedia or resources that can be kind of publicly edited, definitions of things that are constantly changing. It's really hard to keep any record of anything when things are digital and they can be manipulated and changed. And when words can be changed at the drop of a hat, when there's new definitions and meanings for things. Scary stuff, right? So physical connection, physical documentation, folders, writing things with pens and pencils. I know, crazy, right? But these are things that I think we're going to start focusing on. And I'm hoping also part of it's also going to be critical thinking and being able to teach people and ask people, like, how did you come up with that solution? Can you explain it to me? What does it mean? Rather than the banter that we have kind of seen, I think, in recent years, that is just a lot of going in circles and arguing and throwing stuff out there and making accusations or, wild claims about things that people really don't know about. So it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of manifests. Now, in previous years, this is something else that I did that was kind of cool. So I was thinking about like the aspect of like how Gemini is connected to cell phones. It's connected to gadgets, right? It's connected to cars. Let's see, I'll give you guys a list here. So this is my handy dandy rulership book. If you guys are into astrology or learning astrology, I really, really recommend this. That's by Rex Bills. If you click the links in my description, I have a link of all of like the books and everything that I recommend on my channel. So if you're ever wondering like what I'm reading, check that out. But you can look things up by alphabetical order. You can look it up by house. You can look it up by planet or by sign. So I am going to read to you guys a little bit about just the short list of what comes up for Gemini. Okay, so Gemini covers things like accounts, advertising, airmail, arms, asthma, automobiles, biking, books and bookkeepers, briefcases, broadcasts, bronchitis, brothers, sisters, and siblings. Let's see, Central America, things connected to communications, all means of communications, contracts, cousins, drivers, education. Let's see, what else? Handwriting, gossip, that's definitely important. Intellectuals, lecturing, letters, libraries, London, Melbourne. Let's see what else. Journalists, nerves, New York City, although I would argue that, that could be that or Gemini. Or Cancer. Palestine, there you go. Pairs of things that come in twos. Post offices, proofreading, pupils, literature, San Francisco, Saudi Arabia, speech, schools, classrooms, radios, receivers, radio operators, reports, telegrams, telephones, traffic management, transportation, things that are wireless. That's pretty much it, okay? And writers, obviously writing, okay? So just kind of a laundry list of things here. But I was like, I wonder if I go back and I look at the last couple of transits with, Jupiter in these signs, what gadgets were created, so we can kind of get an idea of like, are there new things coming? So this is really cool. So I went back to the last time that we had this. So I have 3 different time periods, the same ones from when we had the unemployment numbers. And I looked at the last time we had Jupiter in Gemini, and this was in June of 2012. So let's look at that. Not many people realize the best way to learn astrology is to look at the past, because history doesn't always repeat, but it does rhyme. So we will see some similarities with these transits. And, you know, and things were in very different places then too. So you're not going to see anything repeat exactly. Obviously, just looking at, you know, June of 2012, Jupiter was in Gemini, but we had the South Node that was in Gemini. So it was kind of dealing with the past in some way, or revisiting the past, or kind of touching on what we remember from past lives. And it looks like there was a Venus retrograde going on at that time too. Okay, so June of 2012 to the end of June of 2013, here's some cool things that were developed. Leap motion controller. So this was made in 2013. The Leap Motion introduced a small device that allowed users to control their computers with hand and finger gestures, adding a new level of interaction to computing. So being able to move, the zoom autofocus, like all that stuff, like, you know, that's kind of cool, right? And like motion, I think motion tracking, I think that's pretty much the same thing. I could be wrong. The other thing that was developed in 2013 was Google Glass. Google Glass was one of the first wearable devices to make a splash in the tech world. It offered hands-free access to information and was able to be seen as a step towards augmented reality. Was it the glasses? I don't really remember, right? I know like now, you know, we're going to start seeing people wearing like all of like the Apple, you know, goggles or glasses or whatever that's called. I think that's going to be a thing in this next year, but augmented reality in general. But it may be a derivative from this. The same year, end of 2012, I think, beginning of 2013, the Oculus Rift, okay? And so that was like some of the first big kind of like moves that we saw with, you know, headsets and artificial reality and like being able to kind of have like these virtual things. And now 12 years later, we see some like virtual reality rooms. We're seeing people that are using this on the internet. We're seeing people who are using this also. Seeing some cool stuff with like the Apple Vision Pro, like people who are doing surgeries and they're, you know, able to pull up the surgery, what would be like on the screen of like a mega screen, so they can see things while they're working with their hands that they couldn't see with the naked eye. Or medical students that are, you know, able to see 3D kind of models of things and like be able to kind of like open things up and look at, you know, what would be in the body without opening something, like crazy. So it's enhancing learning, and it's also enhancing things that really help us work with our hands, right, Gemini? Also, in 2012 going into 2013, Netflix launched House of Cards. Huge fan, love it. I really feel like that in itself is like crazy predictive programming. I'm convinced everything happening in that show is happening right now. If you guys haven't seen it, check it out. But Netflix launched House of Cards. And why is this important? Well, those of you guys who are like Gen Zers, I know it's hard to comprehend, but like Netflix used to be this thing where you had to either go to a box outside of like a Walgreens, and you had to rent a DVD and you had only so long to have it, and then you had to return it, or you had to physically call a number, pick and decide which movie you wanted, and then you had to wait for it to show up in your mailbox. Crazy and archaic, I know, right? Anyway, so Netflix, you know, started getting into creating content. And so one of the big first things they made was House of Cards. For them, this introduced the idea that streaming digital content could be marketable. That if they were making their own stuff, creating their own stuff, whoa, suddenly you'll have more people who are, you know, subscribing to the streaming network. Suddenly they have more control over what they're producing and what they're creating, and not just outsourcing content and having to buy TVs and shows, but they could make their own. Netflix today now streams a ridiculous amount of stuff. It's like crazy. You know, it's got waves where it's got good stuff and not so good stuff, but really that was the killer of Blockbuster, okay? I mean, once again, younger people watching this, you don't remember. You didn't have to go to Blockbuster on a Friday night and like pick out your gummy bears and your popcorn in a tub and then get a VHS. But some of us had to do that. And then I know there's some people watching this being like, I had to go to the movies to watch a movie. I know. But this has been that evolution of being able to bring content in demand directly through streaming network coming from this time period. Pretty cool, right? All right, so let's go back in time a little bit more. Let's look at the 2000s. The 2000s. So we're going to look at July of 2000 and 2000 to July of 2001. All right. So when we look at this transit, Jupiter was in Gemini. Saturn was close by. This was like post all the Y2K psychoticness of like end of the world and what's going to happen with the computers and blah, blah, blah. little bit of a different flavor watching Jupiter separate from Saturn, and I think there may have even been a retrograde at that point. Lots of trines to planets in Aquarius, which is why we saw the futuristic stuff happening, the boy bands, you know, all the things that was changing also collectively with the internet and that becoming a big thing. And we saw some oppositions to Pluto. So it's like, obviously, yeah, you know, 2000 and, you know, 2001, seeing some of the stuff that was happening, you know, post 9/11 and, you know, the war going on in the Middle East. And that was very much information and news being brought to us globally, at least here in the United States, where it's like that entire war was just broadcasted. I remember being a kid, it was just always on. And so that's part of this. But did we see some really big things happen in 2000 and 2001? Heck yeah. So let's start with the Segway Human Transporter. So this launched in 2001, and this is Dean Kamen's invention. It was the first self-balancing electric-powered transportation machine. It was used. It was dynamic stabilized to balance itself and reach up to 12.5 miles per hour. But this was an electric-powered machine that could go places. Well, now today we have EVs, right? Which is electric powered. It may not be solar, but it is that. So that's really big because we saw some kind of innovation in technology. I think a lot of this was the trines maybe to what was going on in Aquarius. And Saturn was kind of bringing the structure, right? What else did we see develop in 2000? Bluetooth technology, right? Wireless technology. This is in everything now. You're hooking up speakers, you're connecting to your car, you're listening to your Apple headset with Bluetooth. So this wireless technology was introduced by Ericsson, IBM, Intel, Nokia, and Toshiba. It allowed for low power, short range wireless communication between devices, revolutionizing the way that we connect and share data. It's in everything now, everything. Okay, huge collaboration, by the way. IBM, Ericsson, Intel, Nokia, Toshiba. I mean, it was like some of the giants in terms of technology, which were all banding together. Can anybody else remember what else came out in 2001? The very first iPod. Yes, I remember that. Do you guys remember that? It was a brick. Then we ended up seeing the iPad mini, or the iPod mini, the shuffle, you know, the different variations of the iPod. I remember having like the big chunky white one, and they were ridiculously expensive. And then the nanos came out and you can get the colors. Anyway, I remember all of that. This was Apple's portable music player. It allowed users to store and play thousands of songs, which was a big deal, big deal, big deal. Obviously, you think about, you know, other things that were kind of going on. We did see some other MP3 players. Obviously, you know, LimeWire and like all these pirating services and downloading things and burning stuff and putting it onto, you know, CDs or iPods was a thing. But I think about how we were still seeing people walking around with like Walkmans. You know, we were still seeing people listening to like headphones with like CDs. And then the iPods came out, and then suddenly it was like, oh, it's like hands-free. I don't have to change the CD. I don't have to worry about it getting scratched. I can listen to all of my music in one space. It was really cool. Do some people still have iPods now? Sure. But, you know, obviously Apple has evolved so much to where it's like now we have the iPhone, the iMusic. You can have your subscription. You can put your music directly into your iTunes. It's already in your phone. If you're somebody like me, you have that annoying track. As soon as you plug your phone into your car, you get in your car, and then your music starts playing, and it's the same song. Drives me crazy. Anyway, iPods were a big thing in the 90s. And then also in, I think it was 2001, Blu-ray was invented in Japan. Short but sweet, right? We had like all these people that were so focused on like DVDs. We got to buy DVDs, you know, and everybody had their bookshelf of DVDs. Where is all the physical media anymore? Where is it? Nobody goes to the store and buys movies anymore. Everybody streams it, right? We're all on this like subscription kind of model. People aren't buying albums anymore. They're downloading it. They're streaming it because they have iTunes or they have Apple Music or they have, you know, Spotify. Interesting. This is taking the concept, moving out of Taurus, which is physical, and moving it into Gemini, which is air, right? So that's where things start to kind of vanish. But Blu-ray was considered to be, I think, like superior, you know, to DVDs. Much more expensive. Didn't seem to last very long. I don't remember if you had to have I think you had to have a Blu-ray player, right? To watch Blu-rays. I don't think you could put them on DVD players from what I remember. But Didn't last very long, but still was considered superior in terms of the quality of the content. Okay, so we go back to 1989, to July of 1989 to 1990. This is around the time I was born. So let's see. I won't remember any of this personally, but you might. Here we go. And this was the last time that we had Jupiter in Gemini, I guess several decades ago. So it started in, let's see, did it go back and forth? Yeah. It looks like it started in August of 88 and then it went into the summer of 89. But some of these things are very important. So one of the first things that I put here was in 1988, we had Steve Jobs that unveiled the Next Cube. This was known as a personal computer aimed at the higher education and business market. This innovative machine featured a powerful Motorola microprocessor and a Magento optical MO disk drive, setting new standards for computing power and storage capabilities. Aimed at higher education, you know, college, teaching, whatever, and then also business markets, developing into the big boom in the 90s where it's like everybody had a computer, right? So that was huge, Steve Jobs. What else came out in 1989? One of my favorite things in the world, the Game Boy. Nintendo introduced the Game Boy, a handheld gaming console that revolutionized the gaming industry. The Game Boy featured an interchangeable game cartridge, a long battery life, making it a popular choice for portable gaming. You guys remember you went from blowing on the cartridges that you had to play at home to having like almost like it was like a flip through book where you had all your other cartridges, right? But the Game Boy, and then eventually, you know, developing into like the Game Boy Color and all the other things that kind of came from that. Awesome. That was such a big part of the 90s. We saw in 1988 the digital signal processor. So digital signal processors became commercially available in 88, enabling the development of advanced audio and video processing applications. DSPS played a crucial role in the evolution of digital communications and technologies. Outside of the Next computer, we then saw later that year also the Next Step operating system. So this was the operating system which introduced the concept of object-oriented programming to the mainstream. This laid the groundwork for future operating systems like Mac OS and iOS. We saw the introduction of the compact disc. So we are moving now from cassettes, guys, okay? So we think about, we had like vinyl and records to then moving to cassettes, which we saw, I think, what was like the 70s going into the 80s. And then finally, as we're coming out of the 80s in 88, the CD became widely available in 1988, offering high quality digital audio in a compact format. The CD would later be adapted in other uses such as data storage and video playback. We don't use them as much today. Obviously, we're not getting those mixed CDs anymore, kind of a bummer. But that became huge for being able to have higher quality content. Eventually, we ended up having like DVDs and other things, but this was more audio and music. But we didn't have that tape that could like get, you know, screwed up. We didn't have to rewind it. It didn't get it wouldn't melt in our car, nothing like that. And we were able to kind of have more media on a flat little disc. And then we had Walkmans and stuff. And then finally in 1989, which is cool, this is when Saturn and Neptune were starting to align right here. Okay, right here. This is right around the time I was born. Saturn conjunct Neptune, high definition television. Okay, so now Jupiter was retrograde into Taurus, but it would come back into Gemini. And Gemini is about TV, media, information, radio, whatever. But the trine to, I think, Saturn and Neptune was setting the stage for new televisions. And, you know, like basically like this would be like the new standard. I think like Saturn and Neptune is setting a standard for like screens and anything that we watch. So the first HD TV standard known as the Grand Alliance was developed in 89. HD TV would eventually replace analog television, offering higher resolution and more immersive viewing experience. So yeah, pretty cool, right? It's cool to kind of see how these gadgets have developed over time. I think that gives us a much more kind of positive look at, you know, what Jupiter and Gemini can mean. There's definitely going to be, I think, a lot of things that are very different in this go round. Like I said, primarily because we are going to see the transit first start with Pluto trine Jupiter. So that's kind of cool. And then eventually we're going to see Jupiter start coming into a square with Saturn. So it's going to be a very different flavor this time around. Let me bring this back to where we're at now. All right, but let me know, what do you guys think? Do you remember some of these time periods that I'm referencing when some of these things came out and how big it was? All right, so let me take you through Jupiter's trek. Like I said, I will do another video on this in the future. This is just doing a preview, and you guys can hear, if you listen to your horoscopes, I talk about this in the horoscopes and what it's going to be doing for the 12 rising signs as well. So this is just one of many. But on the 25th of May, that's when Jupiter is going to enter into Gemini, okay, right here. So that's the important date to kind of watch for when that ingress happens. I'm anticipating, especially like a couple days later when the moon hits Pluto and it starts trining, that's also going to be some activations of this as well, so somewhere around the 27th. And the first transit that I want to look at is going to be on June the 2nd. And this is when Jupiter is going to start trining Pluto. Now, this will only happen one time. When Jupiter retrogrades, it's not going to come back to Taurus, so it's not going to trine Pluto. It's not going to go into the early degrees of Gemini. So this is the one time. Pluto is power. Pluto is wealth. Pluto is about freedom of information, I think, in Aquarius, freeing our minds and how we kind of see things in the future collectively. So information, Jupiter and Gemini, is powerful. Education is powerful. Collective allies is powerful, you know. So this is also really great for wealth. But I think it's going to be more about information and knowledge and what we're learning personally. But still, you have these two planets that are coming together. And it looks like the day that the trine is happening, we also see the moon, which has been in conjunction to both Mars and also Chiron in the North Node. So I've kind of referred to like the beginning of June as like, you know, fortune favors the bold. If you're willing to take bold steps forward, if you're willing to initiate something, it may ultimately end up being something that is particularly positive and really pays off. Especially with Jupiter starting to receive a conjunction from Gemini, from Mercury in Gemini, which is going to be in its domicile. So I'm anticipating this is like good news, like lots of information coming through. We will also have a particularly sweet new moon that will be in Gemini. Oops, sorry guys. That will be in Gemini, and it's going to feature a Venus conjunction, a Venus cazimi. Okay, that's also sweet. And the ruler, Mercury, is conjunct Jupiter. Yes, okay, there's a square to Saturn. We'll get to that. But for the most part, this is actually a pretty damn good aspect. And I think that we're kind of benefiting where we are educated, where we're learning, where we're communicating. It's actually having a pretty positive impact on how we're getting around in the world and what new intentions we're setting with that new moon. All right, so then you're going to see down the road, there will be a Mars-Jupiter conjunction, which is a little dicey. In theory, you know, a Mars-Jupiter conjunction is not necessarily bad because Jupiter is the king, right? He talks about his morals and his beliefs and his travels and all that fun stuff. So in theory, you know, Mars is, I think, amplifying some of those qualities. And, you know, the North Node is in Aries, so it's basically about being brave. And this is going to be about being brave, traveling, moving, speaking out, getting out there, you know, being active in your communities. I want to remind the Americans who are watching this video, you need to go back and look at American history. You guys need to realize that the founding fathers not only put a lot of real work into the Constitution, also into all of the Declaration of Independence and all that stuff. There is an outline that in the off chance that we start seeing that the government is getting out of hand, that we have something that we can resort to. The American Revolution was not just fought on the battlefield. It was initiated through public exchange. It was about debates. It happened in bars, in taverns, in pubs. It happened in city squares. It was not necessarily just about logic when it came to the battlefield. It was about the brilliant minds who came together, even if they didn't always agree. And they created a system that allowed freedom of speech and also the ability to make your own way. That was the beauty of America. And so when I look at this conjunction, first of all, it's at 16 degrees, which is why I'm getting like super patriotic on you guys. It's a Cancer degree, right? It's about your home. It's about your family. It's about where you come from, the past, how you communicate with your family, how you stand up and protect what you have. And it can be seen by some people this summer that being patriotic or paying homage to where you come from or your roots or your ancestry or your culture or your country of origin is going to be basically labeled as a white supremacist or a terrorist threat or somebody who is not to be trusted or somebody who is extremist or people who are just, you know, supporters of this or that kind of political, that movement. We want to strip ourselves of the idea that we are our political affiliations. We are more than that. We are a human race, right? Regardless of our color, our ethnicity, our sex, our gender, our belief system, our education, our social class, we are all individuals. And so I think that what's interesting about this conjunction is that it's going to get people talking about that. It's going to get people super, super active in their local communities. If you're watching this video now, the MO here is to get to know your neighbors, get to know your community, you know, participate at your kids' school, go get involved and talk to the teachers, you know, shop locally, get to know people. Because these are the people who are going to be around you the most the next couple of months. You want to know who you can trust in your neighborhood. You want to know, you know, who has a background in, you know, healthcare, who's got a background in, special services or working for the police department or the fire department, you know, who used to be a kindergarten teacher, you know, because you're going to have an idea of, okay, if there's something that we need, if we're needing more of this in our community, you know, who can we go to? Who can we talk to? Who's going to be a leader? Mars wants to be first. They want to show up first. Jupiter is going to be about relaying some information. Make no mistake, the front line with this conjunction is going to be teachers. It's also going to be neighbors and people who are uniting. It's going to be media companies and also journalists, independent journalists in particular, because Mars is independent. And this is going to be a full-fledged, I think, pushback against authority, the square to Saturn. So it's you know, Mars conjunct Jupiter is like, we're out there, we're talking about it, we're feeling really confident, and we're inspiring other people to create change and to talk about the change that they want to see and take that action and make it happen in the homeland. But the square to Saturn, the opening square, and with Saturn retrograde, it's going to be like, okay, you know, so-and-so on a political level is not showing up. What are we going to do about it? You know, how are we going to show up and save ourselves? Or our local leadership is failing when it comes to education and protecting children, or they're failing when it comes to making sure that we're getting the necessary news and information out. Where are you guys going to meet? Your local library, right? Your local city hall, your local kind of community campuses. These are going to be the places where people are going to be kind of coming together and connecting. So 16 degrees of Gemini, we round up to 17 degrees. And we read the Sabian symbol, which is the head of health dissolved into the head of mentality. The theme is maturation. The symbol speaks to the process of maturation or growth from youthful self-involvement and development of social conscience. The image of head of health dissolved into the head of mentality suggests spiritual growth, self-awareness, and the ability to see the world through the eyes of others. This degree also implies that physical and mental well-being are the result of a well-rounded and very practical grounding in the everyday world. At its highest, the symbol represents self-integration, broad vision, and wisdom. Watch for Peter Pan syndrome and an obsession with youthfulness and the simple refusal to grow up. The accent is on maturity and expansion of consciousness. It's time to put away selfish concerns, put them aside, and focus on the welfare of the whole. Your greatest advantage lies in looking at the future and what you can expect to experience if you continue your present direction or course of action. Guard against relying on others to take care of your needs or handle your responsibilities. Don't get caught unprepared. Stepping stones is maturation, adulthood, development, growth, evolution, completeness, wholeness, well-roundedness, self-integration. Again, okay. Well-being and wisdom. The process of maturation. People who want to be treated like adults, but don't act like adults. I think about the most recent Mars-Saturn conjunction that we had around the time of the eclipse, and it was like a lot of people feeling stunted or thwarted. I mean, I think a lot of that is because Pisces it's skittish, right? It can get scared, it can hide. So there's a lot of people who's like, oh, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to cause problems. I'm just going to kind of stand back here and watch, but hope that other people are going to, kind of like protect you or make changes when the time comes. And then I think about, Mars coming into conjunction with Jupiter, and the square to Saturn is basically like, okay, if you're not going to do something about it, I'm going to do something about it. Prime example, some states right now have passed bills allowing teachers to be to conceal carry. Obviously, very controversial topic. But Mars is protection. Mars is weapons, things that you hold with your hand. And Jupiter is about knowledge and information. So I could definitely see this being more revolving around, well, are we at a point where we're having to do that? I saw a really interesting thing on the internet the other day. Somebody was saying, oh, you don't think that, people who are drinking and driving should be out drinking and driving. So probably the smart thing to do is just to tell all the people who are sober, just you cannot drive. Don't drive. And if you're worried about, drunks being on the road, we'll just take away your right to drive. Seems kind of crazy, right? It's kind of the same thing with gun control. It's like you're taking away the ability for people to, protect themselves, right? And we're seeing some of these things that are kind of going on in the world. To me, it seems like clown world. And you may not share my perspective. That's fine. But I think that when you really start to break it down and you look at what's going on with some of the cities that are actually dealing with some of the most horrendous crime numbers and issues with guns, it happens to be some of the most democratic, some of the most liberal areas, right? That have, or in theory, vote on some of the strictest gun control laws. So those are the people who are less likely to be able to conceal carry or even, have a registered, weapon. I think this is going to be about some of that stuff. I think this is also going to be about communication and getting more involved in education. I think there's going to be more cause for concern with, what's going on in neighborhoods. It reminds me of that song. I don't know who sang it, but it came out recently, like the last year or so. It was like, try this in a small town, and I think of Mars and Jupiter as being like, some neighborhoods where people are going to be like, like, get off my lawn. They're not going to take any shit. And so there may be some conflict going on out in the world. And there may be this want to kind of stir the pot and create conflict, but there is also going to be neighborhood watch programs. There are going to be veterans that are going to start showing up and they're going to start protecting schools. You're also going to see that there is going to be more military members that are going to be speaking out, that are also going to be speaking out against tyranny. You're going to see more people who are going to be taking to the internet and taking to the streets and talking about, like their freedoms. And it's going to be challenging because I thought for some time that the revolution is not going to be televised. You're not going to see it. There's a reason why the last couple of years you were not seeing on mainstream news what's going on with the farmers. You're not seeing the protests that have been going on in Israel. You're not seeing some of the shit that's been going on in Brazil. And it's not that you're not looking for it. It's just that you're not informed. So I think a lot of this is going to be about where we're going to start hearing these collective kind of voices that are going to start rising up and kind of talking about things. In the background, the dispositor, Mercury, it's going to be retrograde. I know you guys are like, we just got over retrograde. I don't want to hear it. But Mercury will be retrograde, which is basically saying a lot of what's going on with this push for communication and talking more about what's going on out in the world is stemming from, Mercury retrograde in Virgo. Health changes, job changes, things pertaining to health and services, and Venus will be coming into an opposition with Saturn. So is it going to be more challenging in some parts of the world? Yeah, I think so. But I think that it's also going to be about being not necessarily willing to fight in a physical sense. This isn't an intellectual way. This isn't asking all the right questions. This is about, stepping up and being like, where did that information come from? Or who told you that? Or like, where's the proof? I think that's going to be part of it. I also feel like this is going to be about people who are taking action and educating themselves and learning, right? About what? Mercury retrograde in Virgo, health, statistics, numbers, analytics, all this stuff, things that can be skewed and kind of manipulated and things that are being told to you. And then you're realizing that the things that you're being told is not accurate. There is a lot of falsified stuff and stuff that's being manipulated in charts and graphs and things to make it look really good. But when we start to see in Q3 of 2024, the real true economic breakdown that's happening, people are going to be like, wait, what? Why is this happening? Where is this coming from? What do you mean I'm getting laid off? Or what do you mean that, we can't afford to pay the teachers, or we can't, do this or do that? Because I think some of these things might be coming. So you will see that conjunction. And then in October of 2024, Jupiter will go retrograde. So Jupiter is going to go all the way up to, actually, let me take that back. Just after the conjunction, Mars will square Saturn. So that's going to happen 2 days later. So something about the news is like bringing up the resistance basically here. Okay, so just food for thought. All right, so Jupiter will go all the way up to 21 degrees this year. So it's going to continue to move forward. It'll turn retrograde in October. Hello. On October the 9th at 21 degrees. Okay? Right here. Something that I was just kind of like thinking about here is that, well, first of all, if you have any personal planets around, I would say like 20, 21, 22 degrees of Gemini, watch that, because that's going to be the square or the retrograde. I'm sorry, I'm looking at Saturn. That will be the retrograde. And the square between Jupiter and Saturn will take place in August, and it will also take place in December. So those are the 2 times where some of the growth is kind of being thwarted. I'll show that in a second. So Jupiter will be retrograde until it will square Saturn again, and that's going to be around December 24th. So let's look at that. Man, that's a bummer, huh? For those of you guys who celebrate Christmas Eve, Jupiter square Saturn, it's like, I would like to do more, but I just can't, And what does that say for travel? What does that say for travel? Not the best time for air travel. And it's happening at an Aries degree, so it looks like, come on. Sorry, guys. It's going to be a little bit earlier, it looks like. Oh, no, wait. I take that back. It's here. So 13, 14, right here. So, yeah, the 24th. Okay. So this will square. So it looks like it's at a Taurus degree. So it's going to be related to money and resources. But when Jupiter is squaring Saturn, look at what's opposing Jupiter. Mercury. So we've got mutual reception, right? Jupiter that's in a Mercurial sign, Mercury that's in a Jupiterian sign. They're opposing each other and squaring Saturn. This is spelling bad news for travel. Air travel, international travel. Those of you guys who are planning on traveling over Christmas, I would get refundable tickets, or I would get trip insurance or something, as much as I hate to say that. But I don't think it's going to be an ideal time for air travel. It looks like right when that square happens, there's going to be some reason, whether it's because of weather or there's going to be some kind of limitations pertaining to that. For those of you guys who also don't live in the United States, this is going to be after the U.S. elections. That's if there's an election. I'm personally not convinced. We'll see. But this would, in theory, be after the elections that would be happening in November. And then we have our inauguration that would happen, I believe, in January. Anyway. When Jupiter retrogrades at 21 degrees, it is going to be retrograding and making some really significant things happen in the US chart. Okay, so this is the second square, Jupiter square Saturn. So it just happens to take place with the Mercury opposition, where there's some big news coming out and things revolving around politics and travel and education and information. And that's also kind of hitting that focal point with Saturn. But if you guys look at the United States chart, let's see, where is it? There we go. If you look at the US chart, oops, there we go. You're going to see Jupiter will go retrograde in conjunction to our natal Mars. Okay, same degree. Right here. Mars obviously rules things like conflict, you know, war, military stuff. And Mars is the United States 12th house ruler, so it's some kind of unexpected conflict, attack, issue with foreign land. Simultaneously, we're also gearing up for a Mars retrograde that's going to be going directly through the United States North Node in the 8th house, which is going to be about, you know, whole sign 9th, international military related operations, 8th house stuff dealing with joint resources and finances, leaders of other countries, and Mars will retrograde over our Mercury, which is going to be about alliances. I do think this is going to be about the United States getting kind of roped into something through some kind of ally, personally. So to have both of those retrogrades really impacting some really pivotal kind of placements on the U.S. chart. Ooh. So what did I put here? So retrograde on top of the U.S. Mars. So when a planet retrogrades on top of a natal planet, or I guess in this case, a country's planet, we're going to see big themes revolving around that. You know, Mars also rules the 4th house of home and family and the homeland. So it can feel like we're feeling impacted or attacked by, you know, media from other countries, and maybe rightfully so, or things that they're saying or they're speaking out against us. You know, Mars in the 7th house is so appropriate for the U.S. chart because it does talk about kind of being a little bit of like a bully on the playground, and where some of that stuff now through the retrograde is kind of boomeranging kind of back to us, and now we're seeing the manifestations within the physical home space, right? Saturn and Neptune is coming into conjunction with the United States IC next year. We'll see retrogrades through there as well. So some of the things you're seeing in Canada, some of the things that you're seeing in Australia and other parts of the world, which seems very extreme for Americans, I think that it's closer to home and it's closer to a reality and a potential manifestation sooner and closer than a lot of you guys think. We're going to see also that Mercury, like I said, will get hit by Mars. And this isn't really a Mars video, but just to kind of show you guys, that will happen. And Pluto is now retrograde back into Capricorn. So we're going to be feeling the effects still of like the Pluto return a little bit. And so Mars will turn retrograde on the North Node here in early December. Right here, Jupiter was right there. You know, Pluto is right there. I mean, there's a lot of things that are kind of getting worked out. And then a Mercury retrograde on the ascendant. So the United States is really, really very much on the world stage in a lot of ways, I think, at the end of 2024. And watch this full moon that's going to happen at the end of July for the big financial kaboom. Because in the United States chart, this is going to be a full moon that's going to be conjunct Pluto and the United States Pluto. I think this is like where we start to really see the effects of overspending and mismanaging resources and budgets, obviously ruled by Saturn. And we're going to be seeing that Saturn is now retrograde and it's in a square with Jupiter. So a lot of financial stuff kind of coming up for the United States as well. All right, so just as a reminder, August 14th, and also December 24th, that's when you'll see the Mars square Jupiter. So just be mindful, like, you know, not Mars square Jupiter, excuse me, Jupiter square Saturn. That's where there's definitely going to be some limitations, some slowdown. You know, we're not really going to be quite seeing the positivity or the optimism relating to Jupiter as much. Now, just peeping really quick, looking at 2025. In February of 2025, Jupiter will then go direct. So it will be direct. Oops, let me make this whole 0 Aries. Sorry, guys. It will go direct. So Jupiter will begin moving forward again. And it will continue to move. It looks like somewhere around, like it'll retrograde to about like what, 10, 11 degrees? Yeah. So it'll retrograde from 21 of Gemini to 11 of Gemini, okay? Lots of retrograde stuff kind of going on at the end of the year as well. So Jupiter goes direct, which is good because we're going to feel like that forward motion around the 4th of February. We will see yet another Jupiter square, except this time it's going to be relating to the nodes of the moon. So this is going to be in May of 2025. And at this time, the North Node has moved into Pisces. The South Node has moved into Virgo. So collectively, we're all looking at Pisces themes. Hidden things, shadow government, immigration, hospitals, stuff relating to jails and mental health, physical mental health issues, developing or being connected to physical health. And then we're going to see Jupiter come into the square with the north and the south node. So that's going to be interesting because I feel like this is going to be about news coming out that people just can't comprehend. They can't understand. It's almost unbelievable. That's kind of the feeling that I'm getting looking at this. And it's like, is this true? Can we trust this? How can we believe this? And looks like that's going to be happening May 18th, right here. Oh, no coincidence. Moon conjuncts Pluto when it happens. So the sun's conjunct Uranus. So it's like an anything goes type of day. It's like, what the hell is happening? Ruled by Venus. And Venus will have finally come out of her retrograde. This is at a Gemini degree, by the way. So it's going to be something relating to communication, news, media, something of that nature, transportation, energy, maybe with Uranus being there. And Jupiter squares the north and the south node, which it can be positive. That can mean, hey, we need to know, we need to learn, we need to explore, we need to read, we need to work with our hands. But it's a little tricky because it's also squaring Saturn, and it can basically mean that we are still feeling held back. That north node conjunct Saturn makes us feel like we've got that, once again, that invisible wall that's just keeping us from being able to move forward. And we're like, why can I not penetrate and get through this? Why can I not see clearly? And that feeling of having lack of trust or being restricted, or, a lot of us, other astrologers have said this. A number of prominent astrologers that you probably follow, a handful of them, about 2 or 3 of them, I've spoken to, we all affectionately refer to this period as COVID 2.0. I'm just the only one who seems to have the balls to say it, but whatever. But yeah, that's kind of like what this is. Whether or not this is stuff that starts kind of coming out a little bit in the fall of 2024, but really starts becoming obvious in the spring of 2025, that's what I think that this is. And I feel like with Jupiter square, it's going to be about people being like, well, I have to become more self-sufficient in my immediate neighborhood. The stuff that you guys are hearing about, like the 15-minute cities and stuff, like it's real. Go and look at the Agenda 2030. Go and look at the move to have like I think it's like 40 cities or something. There's like a whole group of cities that's way more than 40 now. All across the world that are focusing on no cars, limited energy, not being able to consume or buy certain things, having limited amount of purchases for like clothing and other things. I really see it as this. It's like, well, we're going to say, well, it's good because you're walking more, or you're riding your bike and you're getting around town, right? But Jupiter's in its fall. And then the square to the nodes and also Saturn is going to be people being like, oh my God, I feel stuck. I can't do the things that I used to do. And whether that's traveling or just getting around town, driving. There is make no mistake, there is an agenda to do some of these things by 2030. And so at this point, we're getting to 2025. Things are going to be rapidly progressing. And I think this is when the reality might set in. I read a thing the other day. It was like, I want to say it was somewhere in Canada. Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say it's somewhere in Canada. But now there is a place that is requiring people to come and go out of their province using a QR code, and then they are taxed every time they come and they go out of that area. That's like very much the Jupiter in Gemini, scan something, show your phone if you want to move around. Otherwise, you're feeling limited. Super real. If you guys think that the vaccination cards and other things were just for fun, I don't think so. I think this was in preparation and getting people used to scanning stuff and looking at, menus and things like that. So some people may disband and say, you know what, I don't want a cell phone altogether. Is that possible? I don't know. There's definitely a lot of talk about making internet available for everybody. Well, making cell phones available for everybody, making bank accounts available for everybody. You got to ask yourself, why? Why is this? Well, it's a digital kind of state that's being created. Anyway. So Jupiter squared the north and the south node is kind of saying we need more information. And I think with, Mercury being the ruler here, and it's coming into conjunction with the sun and Uranus, I think it's going to be more about digital transactions, CBDCs, introduction into digital dollars, and how if we're going to have these things, we need to have wallets for them. right? We need to have a way of like, you know, showing that stuff and keeping it. So it might be through like applications and things of that nature. We're going to see on June the 10th, 2025, Jupiter enters Cancer in its exaltation, which is like, yes, I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be my Jupiter return. The challenge here, though, is that off the bat, and we're going to see some of the same stuff that we saw with the Jupiter and Gemini transit, is that Jupiter enters into its exaltation in Cancer, where it wants expansiveness emotionally, and it wants to expand the home and the family, and it wants all these things. It's about psychic abilities and nurturing. It will also immediately square Saturn, so it's thwarted. And Saturn is, you know, obviously going to be moving through, Aries, where it is not comfortable. Jupiter is also going to have to come up against Neptune, where it's going to be, well, is this a good thing? You know, I think about like when the North Node went through Gemini, through Cancer, when COVID started. And we saw that South Node in Capricorn, and then all of a sudden the North Node went into Cancer, and everybody spent like, you know, a year at home, and they were like baking bread and all that stuff. And then the North Node went into Gemini, and everybody was like all into like social media, and everybody was talking on phones and stuff. So Jupiter moving into the sign and squaring Saturn and also Neptune, I think is another, I think like very obvious kind of like, oh, there is going to be more focus on home and family dynamic and what's going on with our roots and what we're building or our homeland, at what cost to the individual, you know, at what sacrifice of personal rights or beliefs. So get a little screwed on that on the beginning, but eventually we will see Jupiter start to kind of separate from Saturn and Neptune, and we'll see Saturn and Neptune retrograde back actually into Pisces. They won't fully both meet until 2026. So, you know, it'll be brief, but not a good ingress, in my opinion. Anyway, this is just the first video. Obviously, Jupiter and Gemini, I have to bring you guys lots of information, lots of food for thought. I'm sure there's also other things that come to mind for you. So I would really love to hear from you guys what you're thinking, what you're seeing, what you're feeling. Where else are you seeing some of these signs and symbols related to Jupiter getting ready to go into Gemini? Do you have Jupiter in the third house? Do you have Jupiter in Gemini? Are you a Gemini who's stoked? Leave me your comments below. I expect the comment section to be very lengthy with Jupiter and Gemini, because we're going to see a lot of keyboard warriors. I definitely think that for those of you guys who are like, I'm wanting to start a channel, I'm wanting to start a blog, I'm wanting to start a website, such potent energy in June with the transits into Gemini and the trines to Pluto. You want to be doing these things as soon as possible with that transit before we start seeing squares to Saturn. Okay, even the new moon in Gemini, beautiful, right? Venus Cazimi, chef's kiss, it's square Saturn. So that is a really small time window where if you guys want to go and get your .com, if you want to, you know, go and sign up for your YouTube or your Rumble, or you want to start writing a blog, do that. And diversify, because it's going to be even more challenging for content creators. People are going to have shorter attention spans. So even I'm thinking about this as I create my content. As much as I love sitting here and just shooting the shit with you guys for 2 hours, and I can do it forever, I know that people are going to have shorter attention spans. And what's actually going to do well in this next year is going to be Reels. We may not have TikTok. I don't participate in TikTok anyway, but we may have more move through Reels, shorter videos, things that are going to be more short, sweet, quick, educational videos. People are not going to want to sit through and learn about a whole month of astrology. They're going to go, just tell me what's happening this week. You know, just pull a card for Gemini. That's all I care about. So the delivery of content is also going to have to change. And it may become more difficult for content creators to be able to be abundant, to make a living off of doing that, right? Because it's going to be harder and harder to be able to meet those guidelines and work within the very small, limited framework that we have, unless you're creating cat videos to do this. So I'm thinking about this as well. So if you guys have any recommendations, let me know. I know that there are tons of astrologers and tarot readers on YouTube. I'm well aware. And there's some really great people out there. And there's a lot of people who are like, how do I get more visibility? Consistency, showing up, right? If I look at the Jupiter square Saturn, it's, are you showing up and actually doing the work? Are you being consistent? And for some of you guys, it might mean that you're diversifying, you know, the ways that you're creating content online as well. Anyway, I value your feedback. I hope you guys like this video. go and watch your horoscopes. I talk about it a little bit more there for the 12 rising signs. We will also discuss this more as we get closer to this ingress at the end of the month. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will catch you here tomorrow. We're going to be doing live astrology. Join me at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. I will post the link in the community tab if you guys want to sign up and join me. Don't forget to subscribe. Sharing is caring, and I will catch you guys all back here tomorrow. Until next time, enjoy this transit. I will see all of you very soon. Take care.